My name's Peter Goulds, and I'm one of the directors of the LA Louver Gallery, and it's located, as you know, most of you I think, on 45 North Venice Boulevard. Welcome to this evening's event, Where Are the Voices? A Declaration for the Future. I thought I'd take a few minutes to describe the origins of this evening without laboring the proceedings, and then we'll go through the program. It's good to know that perhaps the evening will be for 75 minutes, so you can pace and brace yourselves accordingly. I'd like to dedicate this evening to the memory of the poet Robert Crossan, who many of you will know. Bob died yesterday. He was born in 1929, and he's a friend to many of us here. September the 11th, 2001 is an auspicious date, and all of us will, of course, remember where we were when this horror took place. All of us, I'm sure, who were alive can remember where we were when President Kennedy, for example, was killed. It's one of those punctuation marks in history. For my own part, I was in northern Idaho when the horror took place on the East Coast, visiting an artist, Nancy Keenholz, a studio visit. And then ensued, for many people otherwise as well, a kind of neurotic trip back, a driving trip, a road trip back to LA, back to my family and colleagues, and together we gathered in shock. And as a group of colleagues together at the gallery, primarily, we began to discuss how we could respond as individuals and perhaps even collectively together. As individuals, I'm sure everyone here, or many of us, got involved in making donations to various organizations. We as a family gave to the Janitors Fund, for example. There were 1,200 janitors employed in the World Trade Center. 100 died, but 1,100 are unemployed. So as a group, we discovered that, much to our lament, that one of our own colleagues, in fact, lost a family member. So we raised funds among ourselves within the gallery and made our donations accordingly. But then in turning to the broader perspective on the event, we began to consider how what function art plays in such a scenario. Does it have a role to play? Artists have very generously, as they in fact always do, it would seem, respond to fundraising efforts to give works of art. Wealthy people make acquisitions. Somehow the two trade off, but in this case it's raising something like $1,500,000 for the relief fund. But what do we do to nourish the soul and the spirit in this regard? Art is not a luxury, but a necessity. Other discussions are art is a measure of the time in which it exists. Art can be a binding, energizing force in society. And then one of our colleagues said, well, but where are the voices? Where is the dialogue? This is after 3 weeks. We're only hearing from politicians. We're hearing from the president and other political voices. Where are the writers? Where are the literary voices? And so therein lay the seed for this evening's activity. In contemplating such an event, and actually I thought of my friend for 26 years, the poet and publisher and educator Paul Vangelisti, and invited him, and he immediately responded and agreed to be the host of this evening's event. The date, Tuesday, December the 11th, was actually chosen by the police permit. So this is just a coincidence that it is now 3 months since the date. The location in Venice is chosen specifically here in front of the sculpture Declaration, which we sponsored being built by Mark di Suvero on behalf of the Venice Family Clinic 2001 Art Walk. The clinic invited Mark to be the focal point of this year's art walk. They chose him not only because he is an internationally known artist, but almost more importantly because his career as an artist begins here in Venice in the 50s, where he has his first studio. Venice, as we all know in this gathering, I'm sure, has been in the post-war years particularly a meeting place and a working environment for artists, for writers. It is the center of a strong literary movement. In fact, I remember when I first came here with my wife in 1972 as a lecturer at UCLA in the art department, we used to frequently visit a place called the Temple of Man. I don't know whether any of you did the same, but many of this podium did. And it was hosted always by the Reverend Bob Alexander, or Buzzer as we called him. And there were regularly readings by Frankie Rios, I remember, and John Thomas, Stuart Perkoff. Even Wally Berman would show up from time to time and recount under the name of Pantalizantos. In fact, in 1978, my wife and I were ordained as ministers of the Temple of Man, so actually we could conduct christenings, weddings, bat and bar mitzvahs, no brisks here tonight. And to the right, of course, this is where many of those artists have been memorialized by Fred Dewey's efforts to build what is indeed a poet's wall, and that contains many stanzas from poems by poets that indeed were a part of this gathering. So without further ado, I want to introduce a Venice resident and someone very responsible for what we have here in this community now. Our council member from LA's 6th District, Councilwoman Ruth Galanda, to say a few words here this evening.
You know, it is, of course, the 3-month anniversary, and as Peter points out, we've been hearing a lot from politicians, so you'll have to listen to one more for a few minutes here. I would like to say how pleased and proud I am that our community's response is not only the response everyone has had of wanting to help the people who have lost family members or friends, but also that instead of just waving the flag, we are now doing what we do best here in Venice, which is trying to be creative and look to the future and look to how we can enrich ourselves and our culture so that we have strength in tough moments, and we have a chance to enjoy that which is positive and beautiful about the world. And I do want to say that I don't think I would ever qualify as a poet for a poetry reading, but I do write poetry. I never let anyone read it because most of it is very nasty rhymed couplets. I have some really quite entertaining descriptions of government in Los Angeles, election campaigning, and a number of other things, but I'm going to spare all of you this evening and not read them because I didn't bring any with me. I do want to thank you for coming out to the beach at night. I think this has been a lot of work here to get this beach renovated and to bring it back to, not only back to its former glory, but to open it up to whole groups of people who really didn't use it very much, like small children who now play on the fountain over here and play out here on the children's play area a lot on the sand. So this is a spot that I think is particularly appropriate for this kind of commemoration and celebration of that which we do here in Los Angeles and particularly in Venice, and that is the creative spirit and the attempt to look beyond the worries of today to the larger meaning of, dare I say it, the cosmic rhythms of the universe, my favorite phrase. We are very proud of this area. We are delighted. I am thrilled to pieces that we are able to use it not only as a beach and a bicycling and roller skating venue, but as a place that really will stand for more generations as a meeting place for the arts. And so I am going to, at Peter's recommendation, go sit back there so I can see the sculpture at the same time as I'm listening to the reading. So I don't want you to think I'm leaving. But I thank you all for coming, and I look forward to the rest of the evening and to seeing you again here frequently. I
want to really thank Ruth for all she's done in this community. She's been a terrific stalwart supporter of what we've been doing here. And without further ado, I want to introduce the president of Otis College of Art and Design, Sammy Hoy, who will set the evening off and introduce Paul Vangelisti. So, Sammy.
Hi, good evening. Since September 11th, we've been barraged with thousands and thousands of images, sounds, and words, a virtual cacophony of impressions, opinions, and reports through the media. And yet, time and again, when people are asked to share their feelings about 9/11, they reply, there are no words. There are no words, no mundane words which could capture the feelings, the emotions, and the sorrow. And yet, in times of great need and vulnerability, people are often moved to recall a verse, an image, a lyric, some poetic condensation of meaning that somehow touches the core. When reality is indescribable, when one is at a loss of conventional utterance, one turns to art, the visual, verbal, and musical voices of the human soul, capable of giving full expression to humanity. Voices that have the power to distill the abstract and shed light on the incomprehensible. After September 11th, people attempted many ways to express themselves. T-shirts, flags, posters, and concerts proliferated. At Otis, we chose to share our feelings in the form of a giant wooden quilt, comprised of over 500 wooden squares, in each square an individual expression by an Otis community member. The outpouring from students, faculty, and communities was tremendous. The block displayed sculpture, images, and poetry straight from the heart. The quilt represented a range of emotions from anger to love, to fear, sorrow, and hope for peace. It was quite remarkable to see, but even more remarkable was the fact that from this idea stage to the physical connection of the quilt, it took a little over a week. It is local action at Otis, but its implication of what each of us can do when we connect with others is universal. We invite you to look at this quilt at Otis, which is now displayed at the Gayliff Center for Fine Arts at the Westchester campus. This evening, we turn to poetry in search of answers and consolation. Throughout history, poets have recorded human experience. Poetry is perhaps our most truthful forms of documenting the pain and hope of mankind. But whether through the art of word or images, we are ultimately seeking ways to connect, to express, and to seek inspiration for our common future. When we become disillusioned, when we witness man's inhumanity to man, art reminds us of the tremendous potential of the human spirit. And this awareness sustained us through the dark hours, help us understand the past, and ultimately enable us to believe in our future. So tonight, we stand beneath this magnificent sculpture by Mark di Suvero entitled Declaration. Like the sculpture's fearless and hopeful form, we are inspired to reach upward, higher, to understand, and to make our own declaration. And here is mine. Even if we could go back to 9/10 and not have been witness to the enormity of blind human hatred, not to have thousands of lives lost, and not have our sense of safety and freedom so fundamentally shattered, and not have to resort to war, I would hope that we would not revert back to our complacent mindset of September 10th. 9/11 and its aftermath have awakened us to the need of empathy, the need of a compassionate approach to otherness, and the need of peaceful resolutions to conflicts. In other words, to the need of positive human connection. Since 9/11, we have individually searched for ways to respond to the human tragedy. Some of us have come together to initiate collective responses. May all of us learn to come together to fashion a better world, a better future. May we always remember our strengths in unity, locally and globally. May we commemorate the lives lost and celebrate our lives together that must thrive on through our solidarity and united action. May our voices be many, be strong, and be heard. Tonight, we will hear from contemporary voices as well as voices from the past. Since I'm not a poet, I would like to close by sharing some words of W.H. Auden, and this selection is from his poem, September 1, 1939. All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie, the romantic lie in the brain of the sensual man in the street, and the lie of authority whose buildings grope the sky. There is no such thing as the state, and no one exists alone. Hunger allowed no choice to the citizen or the police. We must love one another or die. Defenseless under the night, our world in stupor lies, yet dotted everywhere, ironic points of light flash out wherever the just, exchanging the messages. May I, composed like them, of eros and of dust, beleaguered by the same negation and despair, show an affirming flame. Thank you. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce Paul Vangelisti, brain parent of this event and also chair of the Graduate Studies program in writing at Otis. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming, and we'd like to thank the elements also for being a little kinder than they were earlier in the day. Can you hear? Louder? Louder, okay. The first person I'd like to introduce is Fred Dewey. He is the executive director of Beyond Baroque Foundation and has been mentioned before. He curated for the city the poetry wall over here on our right. Founded in 1969, Beyond Baroque has been a landmark literary arts center both on the local and national scene. This evening, Fred will address certain concerns of poets and writers in our communities as events have unfolded since September 11th. Fred Dewey.
Good evening. Thanks for coming out. In a remote area of Niger recently, the bones of an ancient creature were discovered poking up out of the Tenere Desert. This creature was huge, enormous, a crocodile the size of a mobile home, terrorizing the earth from the primeval swamp of terror which was its home. It was named Sarcosuchus Imperator, the flesh-eating emperor. Around the same time, here at home, a war on the world, on reality, began in earnest. It is a war, we've been told, that will have no end. That we govern ourselves and have a constitution protecting us and the world appears for this permanent war, as for all war, to be an obstacle. This is a war to smoke out every opposition, whatever the price, to conquer every reality, to destroy the power of speech. We will deny everything. We will break every treaty. We do not need this world, and so we must abolish it and the words to describe it. This is the hour of terror, and we are right to be afraid. We have welcomed into our homes executioners, banal men and women of endless ambition, only to embrace their cause. We are the only people who could do this. We are the avant-garde. We are the executioners of reality. The political animal, this dangerous animal, this cursed creature, must be extinguished from the earth so that we may rise like a phoenix from its ashes to be free. We no longer seek to govern ourselves. We've been told it is no longer our right, and so we have decided no one shall have this right. We will rule the earth, and our footsteps will strike terror in every heart and mind, in every village and home, making the earth and language quake. But voices from the world remain, no matter how much we loathe and seek to harm them. They torment us, even if some have determined these voices must never be found. To experience what exists is too insufferable. To hear the world spoken of, too intolerable. The Constitution and all rights across the earth, we must reduce these to scraps, spitting them in wet clumps full of phlegm into every dark corner. We must rip up these scraps, scatter them on a burning wind that bursts every bulwark into flame. Every right must be shattered, every actuality liquidated, laws forged one by one, hurled at our head, eye, and groin. Make way for the executioner. Make way for the White House mountaineer. Make way for us. We no longer want to be reminded of the world, to be rid of the world, to be free of the Constitution, to be free of the terrible burden of self-government for all. Such is the endless rebellion, the endless job that America has become. It's pragmatic to assure nothing impedes us, nothing restricts us. We are liberated, totally liberated. We are the emancipated ones, free at last of every fact, of everything obvious and clear, of all that matters, of all that has ever mattered, free to be what we want to be, never more to be concerned with who we are, and never again with what we have become. In such a world, the White House mountaineer finds every murder a blessing, every death an opportunity. He is all that we can hear, clacking and cluttering, climbing over blood and bone, slayer of constitutions, murderer of elections, devourer of the masses, destroyer of nations. Soon the midnight hour will come, when pythons must turn on ordinary snakes, when the pigs, fat on slop, will eat the chickens, when the wolves, finished with the deer, turn to the rats. We hug and tell each other how good we are, how we are the defenders of liberty. Lies. We have given up our dignity. Our representatives clamor not to preserve freedom, but to craft its final passage. This is the time when the fool has been crowned wise man and governor of all he surveys. It is a time rife with opportunity, but not for us. Welcome, for this is the hour of the executioner. The earth is trembling. All hail, Commander-in-Chief. Hail the White House mountaineer. We cower, bow down before your unparalleled majesty. The law is in your mouth at last. None is your equal, and all are your servants. We greet you, great Sarcosuchus Imperator, born from the swamp of terror, from the desert waste, our savior, flesh-eating emperor, ruler of the earth.
Best known for her innovation in text image work and her collaborations with painters, photographers, and other poets, Norma Cole is also a noted translator of contemporary French literature. Her most recent books of poetry include Spinoza in Her Youth, Moira, and Mars. Tonight, Norma will read 3 new poems.
Thanks for coming, and thanks to the people who organized this event. And I appreciate being here to read with the other voices. I'm going to read 1 poem that was written before September 11th and 2 from after. I think they're questioning the before and afterness of it. The first one's called The Catastrophe. It was written on September 9th. This is strange tongue in the form of a heart where atoms of color dance, colors of manifestations on the soft ground of conscience. This is an illustrated fish, a little blue fork, or prongs as incarnations. This is a bucket of energy, a barred spiral. This sandbar permits the passage of blood with variations, horizontal. Light. This light is on a dark blue ground, or a deep red ground, or a midnight green ground, a disk of dancing metal arrows, all show. Ruling colors of the spiral, precipitous, terrifying, an ancient treaty. Give up the idea of state. Can it be said? To whom can it be said? To someone's father or mother? The world, night, demolition of homes, control of water? Lack of water, build and destroy. Trial, walls of the moat or the room, their design and multiplication, constant dialogue of light and shade, narrow verticals, rise, all rise, rare and free, or rather free, a little free, an image of redefining, explicit, the point of the arrow, head down, twice the energy, little known and less represented, observed in various visible forms, clarity, display, evolving, the many, the tongue as haptic form evoking that principle. This next one, called Units for Tomorrow, was written for a magazine, and the theme of it was supposed to be paradise. So I was thinking about what Walter Benjamin once wrote, talking about somebody else's idea of paradise, where he said that it's just like things are now, only a little different. I've often wondered about the a little different. Units for Tomorrow. The fighting fish at first looks just like a fish. The picture of evolution in the strangeness of what was occurring we didn't know. In the vivid familiarity of our lives. What was happening at the payphone? It wasn't yet known. It was a time of exuberant niches hit across, and unexpected and burgeoning, in a squat, source of which, not yet a test for it, photons and compressed air. A continuous scansion of the inner ear, the outer world, symbolic socio-physical universe, in order to discover where to adapt, to reset what was out of kilter, the unaccountabilities. Our collision will be elastic, importation into it. In general, the pattern for the time, dearest May, time to go. We are battered, so this letter is wet, a conversion myth. Oops, readership. Inescapable morphology, what's yours? Dropping slowly, cutting across Rossetti's dream, I said the water was choppy. Attack, decay, the body slop, the birthday came and went, the picture, the vividness. Flowers on the hillside and the stench of burning flesh, the reporter said. In the shantytown. You have a sweet voice, une voix douce, una dolce voce, St. Ives, Land's End, Grasse Vence, Bar du Loup, at a prayer site in the cemetery on a burial ground, and relocation on paper. On paper for generations, for the future, on your bread, on your back, in your practice. At present, no explanation, undevourable at the barbecue, at a friend's, in the house before the movers come, at the table, on the carpet, at the beach, in a dream, reading, in the city. It was my faucet I was looking up. What I want is inviolate delirium of reason. It sets its sights on paradise, glorified generality. A camel with a tiny saddle, a spare tire, turned viridian, gray fingernails arranged in a fan on the waiting room wall. Rain, ocean, heart, night, stream, glow between. People sleeping in the house. And this last one is called Foreign Dew, and it draws a little on, actually I want to bring forward the poet H.D.'s writing from the Second World War. I'm thinking particularly of a couple of poems she wrote in 42, 43, one called Christmas, one called May 1943. And there's some images from her work in this. Foreign Dew. Time is her advantage, her medium, while everything else, the poem is time, just as she is a set of equations in a time frame. I forgot to say there's static in this poem, and on the page it's a row of X's, different numbers of X's, and I'm just going to read them, you'll know when it is. Just as she is a set of equations in a time frame, by a little journey, a piece of narrative, the sound of story. The address equates the addressee. You with memory, you are in the past now. The you who may say the imposition, the superimposition of times is the event, texture, technologies of measure identified or remembered, until a placard states the facts. There is a return of a haunting that is welcome. The ghost of the first line returns in a happier form as a declaration of what does it mean that, or when for the poet wants, or from the midst writes of the fourth year of deprivation and fear. I say, or over daring act of imagination, as well as the happy ghost of the end of an earlier war. Advantage introduces a new set of relations back to a tone more appropriate to the present. The miserable low situation, a lexicon of discomfort in a grammar of The tedium of destruction, suffering, long-suffering, the drenched ones who slither and those who are sunburnt. The sing-song tedium of the water rat life, suddenly the shift announced before the section break in the enjambed kss, is heroic, change of tone, who'd know it? Refrain, heroic, caesura, kss, the measure changes. Slows, opens into denial, recapitulating the confusion of his shadow. The speaker, the I, who was always saying, or wanting to say, cut, abrupt edit, to attention, kss, is introduced halfway through, kss, were we prepared for this? Her entrance, a bit theatrical, but we've seen, if not heard, the chorus. They meet in the obituary, which, as it turns out, is not the end of the story. The chorus returns, the wet, enduring creatures. The obituary takes on the form of a mystery, this mystery thing on 1,000 identities from fairy tales to sainthood, in the safety of a magical land, waterscape, in the shape of one question, the opener of time. Frozen tears of oysters are the gods, yawning on the frozen subject, dew, a foreign Eden, dew on the frozen subject of tears, dew, frozen on the foreign body, dew on the foreign tears. Thank you.
Dennis Phillips is the author of numerous books of poetry, including Study for the Ideal City, Credence, Arena, and A World. From 1985 to 1988, he was the executive director of Beyond Baroque Foundation. Tonight, Dennis will read from his book, A World.
Hi, I can't see you, and I may be too cold to speak. I work slowly, and I haven't begun to process September 11th yet, so this book was published in '89. I extracted a somewhat, melancholy theme from it. The plain of Elpenor at the pit of Tiresias, a hat for each day, a quivering jugular of black yew for each hat. Plates and plates of volcanic slab, smooth terrace layers down to the shore in slag, to dark hell currents, or name the river. Enter. What any of the ghosts prove by their entrance, otherwise a waste that speaks future perfect. Black hull departing, no mark in these waters. Plates, dull wood, thin strata to the pit. Sword-hewn, black wood soil. Those who have led us here, but have not been here. Nel mezzo. Pity of error, pumped black blood to voice the prophet. Find them deep sleeping, whose voices call up, arch over for someone to take down. Gave your sacred element to the air and wilted, or your fluids to an ether and dried quietly away. A voice, a single line, spawned from a word, a sound, a quiet, looked for a category, who shouted, "Come down, little sir, come down. The pitch is too steep. You don't have the balance." And you stayed put, the sea breeze, the view, your veins open, passing the gift eventually to ground, in thanks, bleeding, pale tribute. But foresaw your footing and made it, sutured tight. Water in great square reserves, returned your loss but bluer and cooler than you had given it. We live in a city, but this one has streets. Layers, a sheen, 12 million assassins, and a rain so acid, a mile later, 1,000 miles later. We drive on the streets, 1,000 dry footings this time, summer, and incredibly no one can remember which street. Once there was a man like a wall, so tall, so wide, and now a city. We live in a city. That's us now, housed in a mirror. That's us, looking. There's a place, and it's a crater malignant beyond chemicals and radium. There's no incision to excise it. And it's not just one side of an argument, because the place breeds explosions and murder, and the home of the destroyed breeds the next destruction. Only a boat on a safe sea, still waters, perpetual Pacific. Touch land, take water, set off. Adrift, lightless on black ocean. You call and the fabric collapses. Faint expectation, please cheer me. Then plain, flat. Missiles were shot again today, at first towards rumors, then the body of their leader was found. Some deadly genetic construct is released, message from dying organ to kill as much and more, win a bright spot. Then silence, call dispatched, to plain tone, howls dismissed, too weak, too strong. It may be true that it's all about amassing an audience, that thinking beyond that is only a decoy, or it may be that some fluid chokes us off so sharply only a decoy would save us. They hold up dead daughters, then everyone hangs out their dead. Nothing is solved, only the arena enlarges.
By the way, please, if you're sitting in the back and wondering, these chairs are not reserved. There are reserve signs on them, but like other things, they're simply an illusion, the signs, that is. The chairs are here, so please, and it's warmer up here. Not up here. Up here it's cold. There it's warmer. Poet and teacher Peter J. Harris is the author of Hand Me My Griot Clothes, autobiography of Junior Baby. He is the host of Inspiration House, Voice Music for Whole Living, a weekly radio program which he produces for KPFK Radio. Peter will read 2 recent unpublished poems.
Put down your gun. Pick up your baby. Undo your collar. Open up your arms. Strip off your uniform. Salute to your equal. Unpin your badge. Reveal your rib cage. Dismount your tomahawk. Home train your tongue. Swallow your mushroom cloud. Civilize your crosshairs. Put down your gun. Pick up your baby. Don't be foiled or fooled by the zip code. The ocean is ours. The mountain is ours. The river is ours. The forest, ours. The sky is ours. No to anything less. No to anything less than horizons and freedom and justice and peace and humanity, day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out, flooding the calendar with holidays and democracy and festivals and meetings and resolution. I'm down with that. I'm down with that. Do not be tempted or trapped by the zip code. Health is ours. Wealth, ours. Government, ours. Law, ours. Safety, ours. Anything less, anything less, no. Period. No to any murder disguised as deterrence. No to any whims disguised as policy. No to any mercenaries disguised as leaders. Any theories disguised as gospel. Any gossip disguised as science. Day in and day out. Day in and day out. Flooding our calendars with baptisms and rebellion and ceremony and protection and institutions. I'm down with that. I'm down with all of that. Do not be stamped. Do not be seduced by the zip code. The second is ours. This hour, the sun, the galaxy. No to anything less than food. No to anything less than shelter and work and family and life. Day in, vigilance. Day out, vigilance. Day in, fiestas. Day out, fiestas. Day in, militants. Day out, militants. Day in, day out. Dedication, cooperation. I'm down with that. I'm down with that. The voice of fear is a flimsy tourniquet against this danger. Against this danger, children have stopped playing in the rain. Their mothers, their fathers cannot see their futures. Will someone speak the drenched language? Who will spill water from their tongue, mouth to mouth, against all danger, refreshed and announcing, I am just a citizen, but I can heal the world. I am just a citizen, but I can defend my children. I am just a citizen, but I can grant their wishes. The voice of paralysis is a one-sided broadcast without complaint. Without complaint, heroes have limped a coward's retreat. Their lovers and their teachers cannot feel their power. Will someone leap this hollow language? Who will muscle daring into their leap? Heart to heart, resolving complaint, convinced and revealing, I am just a citizen, but I myself, I honor conviction. I ain't nothing but a citizen, but I sip revelation. Me, I ain't nothing but a citizen, but I live my intention. We can find enemies anywhere. Where are the allies dedicated to chumping fear and paralysis? We can find the danger anywhere. Where are the havens draped with honeysuckle for food and wisdom? We can find gangrene any old place. Where are the vitamins spiked with helium for circulation and vision? We can find silhouettes anywhere. Where are the citizens? Where are the citizens? The voice of our bravery is a chant of lightning, freezing the mirage. Freezing the mirage. Heroes are charting the quicksand. Their footprints, their trail marks, harden into muddy architecture. Will someone stride with common purpose? Who will gather to inspect the promise of oasis, voice to voice, claiming the mirage? claiming the mirage, honored and rejoicing. We are the company of the citizens. Put down your gun. We are the company of the citizens. Pick up your baby. We are the company of the citizens.
Diane Ward is the author of numerous books of poetry, including On Duke Ellington's Birthday, Relations, The Light American, and Portraits and Maps, a recent collaboration with artist Michael C. McMillan. Diane will read from Relations and Portraits and Maps, as well as one new poem.
I just want to thank Paul for putting this together and everyone else that had a part in it. It's pretty wonderful. I'm going to start out with a couple of pieces that were written in the 80s. Kudos. I enclose my equal flesh, central dead or living share, a world's our fathers, grown without celebration, slowly in time, your boys, back from gun catalog, and I tried to transform it into something friendlier. Settle safe, commando arms, hide like, self-defense, nor violence, auto-possession, snugly arms, far in haven, Teflon S, Olive O, our self-enchant, MS Safari, import from harm by interarms, safe-held breath, succor manually, peril cocked, uncocked, home is rocked away from light. This is in the book that Paul mentioned, that the collaboration with Michael McMillan, and it was written during the other Gulf War. Portrait manifested in numbers. Not thinking of you, 3 for 1, or an additional 2/3 off for yourself, not thinking of you. Possible sinking superiority of elastic conditions. A biscuit is stiff but weak. Steel is stiff and strong. No thoughts ever felt uncertain. Free admission. Spent entire arms and legitimate days spent shattering, being pushed together. Memory of my dear, a place for your face to wax sad, embrace external forces whose heart was disposed to despise both life and death. It means most people won't continue to float in the world they've known. A good blow dealt in size and in design, an unprecedented outpouring. War makes thieves, no fly. Peace hangs them. And the last two are more recent. Cricket dream. At bottom, paradise is stagnant, an unfilled mouth on an outstretched neck, directs personal freedom away, personal safety away, where all the plastic flowers die of no responsibility to reflect on life, can't absorb anthropomorphizing any port in a storm. To dream of crickets invading your home denotes poverty, in which any sized thought's wrong. A mistake's been made by not considering more, by never touching the point of never slicing cleanly through. To kill a cricket in your dream signifies your poverty will be short-lived. Your dream will stop abruptly. The dark is thick and flowing, though aimless now. Tiny, pulsating lights endlessly streaming toward the cricket have ceased. Its electric difference in the darkness is done, and though you're no longer poor, you can no longer picture a beautiful sound. And I'll end with anticipatory grief. 3 intersecting axes. Day-to-day control flies low over an emotion, an island, life itself. Even an other blip on a screen is an antidote to loss. Identity isn't pronounced self-recognition, before, same, normal, after, different, abnormal, too many to count. Loss of referenced legs and feet, loss in the bones, threat spirals around the edges. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we'll get our protocol straight here yet. It's my pleasure now to introduce Paul Holdengräber and Tim Rutten of LACMA and the Los Angeles Times, respectively, and they're going to engage in a discourse, if call it that, on the aftermath of September 11th.
Not really. What we are going to do is offer you a moment to think with one of the very great thinkers of the 20th century. Hannah Arendt, in a sentence of The Life of the Mind, said that Cicero ascribed to Cato, "Never is a man more active than when he does nothing. Never is he less alone than when he is by himself." Assuming Cato was right, the questions are obvious. What are we doing when we do nothing but think? Where are we when we normally, always surrounded by our fellow men, are together with no one but ourselves? And so what we would like to do, Tim and I, is read to you and perhaps comment, I'm not yet sure, a passage of Isaiah Berlin. This is a great thinker I was talking about just a minute ago. Isaiah Berlin is, without any doubt, in my view at least, one of the very great minds of the past century. He once said about Alfred Brendel that he was not full of himself, but full of others. And that was true also of Isaiah Berlin. And Tim and I will now read to you a passage, and I will ask Tim to introduce that passage.
Thank you. In the last year of his life, Isaiah Berlin was asked by the faculty of Wuhan University in China, the philosophy faculty, to produce for their students a summary of his preoccupations through his long and very active life. And he did that. It was the last thing he wrote. And one of the topics of reflection, of exploration, which he brought to their attention, was something central to his thinking, something central to this moment in history, which is the centrality of pluralism to the Western project. It is pluralism and all that it entails that is under assault at this moment, and it is in its affirmation, Paul and I believe, along with so many others, that the resolution to this crisis of both the material world and the spirit may in fact reside. So we will now read this brief summary of his notions, his ideas, his conclusions about pluralism. These words are Isaiah Berlin's. I came to the conclusion that there is a plurality of ideals as there is a plurality of cultures and of temperaments. I am not a relativist. I do not say, I like my coffee with milk and you like it without. I am in favor of kindness and you prefer concentration camps. Each of us with his own values which cannot be overcome or integrated. This I believe to be false, but I do believe that there is a plurality of values which men can and do seek, and that these values differ. There is not an infinity of them. The number of human values, of values which I can pursue while maintaining my human semblance, my human character, is finite. Let us say 74, perhaps 122 or 26, but finite, whatever it may be. And the difference this makes is that if a man pursues one of these values, I, who do not, am able to understand why he pursues it, or what it would be like in his circumstances for me to be induced to pursue it. Hence, the possibility of human understanding.
That is why pluralism is not relativism. The multiple values are objective, part of the essence of humanity, rather than arbitrary creations of men's subjective fancies. Nevertheless, of course, if I pursue one set of values, I may detest another, and may think it is damaging to the only form of life that I am able to live or tolerate for myself and others. In which case I may attack it. I may even in extreme cases have to go to war against it. But I still recognize it as a human pursuit. I find Nazi values detestable, but I can understand how, given enough misinformation, enough false belief about reality, one could come to believe that they are the only form of salvation. Of course, they have to be fought, by war if need be, but I do not regard the Nazis, as some people do, as literally pathological or insane, only as wickedly wrong, totally misguided about the facts, for example in believing that some beings are subhuman, or that race is central, or that Nordic races alone are truly creative, and so forth. I see how, with enough false education, enough widespread illusion and error, men can, while remaining men, believe this and commit the most unspeakable crimes. Thank you.
Thank you. Douglas Messerli is the author of numerous books of poetry, fiction, and drama, most recently Letters from Hanus and Bow Down. He is also the founder and publisher of Sun and Moon Press, one of our country's foremost publishers of international new writing. Douglas will read from a new work called Between.
I'm going to read 3 short prose poems from Between. Between is a work in which I've been writing through the works of other poets, stealing phrases, bits and pieces, putting them together and weaving them in a kind of collage of my own, but at the same time trying to get the tone and feeling of the poet's work. In fact, many on this stage have participated in Between, because then I send the poems to the poets and ask them in turn to write through my poetry or through the poem I've just written or through some other form in response to my poem. So these are 3 works from Between. The first one is written to Tan Lin, a young Chinese-American poet who Sun and Moon published some time ago. And if the name sounds familiar, you should know that his sister is Maya Lin, the woman who designed the Vietnam Memorial. And together now, he lives with his sister in New York on the Bowery, which is very close to the World Trade Center. The breathless finger on the clock-stopped hand. Can your sister create a monument for this? Say, scream, scrim, savvy, sexful, sinful, scintillating, scared, separated, spent, slippery, slack, slapped? In particular, like the recurring sense of something happening like nothing, like my better judgment, like wishes in general that don't in general resume. I believe this is a sunset. I fan and fan. The glove of a mother, love without worse. Unstrap me this recourse. Sucked into nothing, gaze at pain, objects in sickening pitch. Now all looms under a shoe, our plains agape. And such aches, out a gash in its sides. I numbered 9 riveted stars, igniting and raging. What's a photograph? Eyeless dust is smiled, dust is bawled for, dust is interacting with a phosphorescent light whose filament is temperamental and flashes on and off at arbitrary intervals. The janitor arrives and lips garble in the river. Oh, river, my river in rope in a swarthy glass of water. Figures double. The arm is inside the audible hand that touches. Dear where, face desk. Now a future tablet reproaches formula, shreds heaven, responds with wave. Now your body spins. Knowledge of resist. Epigraph slab. That was written on September 16th. September to Sees Notenboom. Sees Notenboom is a noted Dutch novelist and poet. It was a month like October, but behind the window, riding the dark horses of everyone's life, the man beside me was a statue, you. He stands there bleeding. The papers melt, the photos fade, the stone is suddenly wax. Time swallows its own reappearance. See how the water erases it, us. Poetry can never be about me again, about you. We've seen the armored clouds, the plains of flames and swords, the angels of ruins from the other end of the dream. Now we too, together with many a scholar and slave, are victims of our own revolutions. Odysseus, alas, has never come for a visit, and the ferryman has asked for his fee. It is that infatuated moment when heads are not yet skulls. Written on September 26th. This weekend before the death of Bob Crossan, I wrote a poem to Bob Crossan. And of course, yesterday morning he died, so there will be no answer to this one. And everywhere again there is an argument. And everywhere again there is an argument that they should keep. The people above ground inhabit proliferation. Those below the designate index. To what? Qualities like libraries and museums, subterranean vaults. If you read any closer, introduce yourself. Then there is a moral, always. In America, they offer you a whole waterfall when all you asked for was a drink. Some of them attempt to escape across freeways. Others sink into solidarity the way you might wear a sombrero or a sash. Still others go back east to Detroit, painting murals on whatever has been left to stand. I grew up reading them, trying to comprehend what those scenes might depict. It was a solitary rehearsal to get ready, to be an American, to anticipate the audience of the entire planet, to wipe out Wyoming, like a bat out of hell, to blast the cave to China and back. What is expected and what is from, what is given and what has been taken away. And everywhere, again, there is an argument that they should keep. the people above and those below, which is interesting that Americans always have a place to go. Thank you.
Standard Schaefer is the author of Nova, the 1999 winner of the National Poetry Series Prize. He was also the co-founder and editor of the the literary magazine, extra syllable in that, Rhizome, and is presently in the planning stages for a new magazine publication. This evening, Standard will read from a work in progress called Water and Power.
Thanks. I'd been working on a thing about the West and the history of the West in LA, and trying to revise it when this happened. And this one I was revising even till today, but it seemed to click in the light of issues of culture and history and how we perceive our role at this time, and also very definitely in the spirit of Bob Crossan, whose poems about LA were very much on my mind as I worked on this book. This is called The Mountain No One Talks About, or the 40s. Begins or does not at 40, or in the movies, with or without gold or legal age, whether or not war is work for all, always with Diamond Lil. There is work, her falsetto heels across the floorboards, Spanish trickling from the day, a kind of provocation to the heat lamps and chaparral of Manzanar, but half water, half wind. The violin gradually corrupted the lanai, or the climate built on gunpowder, and smeared over the eyes of Rita Hayward, high on velvet. Or was that the girl printed on the background of the check, who leased her eyes to the city of Ojai? Or perhaps it was another Miranda altogether, who, true to the rites of spring, took her guns strictly bullets first, and from there was shipped east and west at once by Colonel Capra and the Hollywood canteen, to cough out an alibi no brighter or better than Ojai or Odessa, daisy after daisy, the sky black with ducks, when Disney, against the metaphysics, asked to sit out Casablanca like a brand of beer, of trout fat and hard freight, like a miner's song brought out to defeat more recent arrivals, 12-tone music and a cresting fluorescence, concealed and embodied in the punchline to the fishing guide's joke that he don't mind reading, but only for knowledge. The valley returns to its lush, sheep-like devastation, relying very sparingly on the real, or Veronica Lake, or opening day, but knows damn well that with an airport this town could be as big as Laredo, so is willing to abide questions and interviews that all boil down to whether or not he is impotent. But the only way to avoid impotence, sincerity, or Hollywood is, as Stravinsky said to the man who was fixing his tire, to live there once and for all.
Martha Ronk's books include Desire in L.A., State of Mind, Eye Trouble, and Displeasures of the Table. She is also professor of English literature, specializing in Shakespeare and early 17th century literature at Occidental College. Tonight, Martha will read from another of her books, Desert Geometries, a collaboration with artist Don Suggs.
Thank you. Desert Geometries is an elegy in which the forces of civilization are represented by various geometrical shapes. The line. From the cemetery to the ridge is uneven as the makeshift path parts the waves. Scrub blues its way on either side and sways with the wind. One stalk creaking as thin winds take it in hand and tow the line of turmoil. It seems a mark in the brain can't recall from before this utter and absolute sear. Juniper blue and unplucked, harsh and rude, oh, once more. A sign. This infernal sadness comes from waking without a sign, catching nothing from memory, so that even being spoken at 3 a.m. is lost to last year, or a floor mattress dulling the sounds of waters where no one drowned in her sleep, or dreamed up paper dried by fires and left in stanza-like bits. Circle. The hawk circles the air above the olives, black and cut back. The prunings lie next to the circle of ash to be burned in the same expedient way. That it looks like ritual, or that the hawk portends the death of small birds, is a lapse, a weakness in logic the circle perfects. Black feathers against the sky come again in a brush with stillness. The gnarled branches belong to those who see them not as solicitation. Edge. Undusted, unmoved, until the rip of the shadow collapse. Is it silver which causes upheaval, or plates too close to the edge a point of view contains? Objects no sleeper blinds, by fluorescence no faucet unknown, or the doors shutting of its own accord. The look of the world before time, the scatter of clips and ribbons, keep shoving them back. Residue. The residue in the red rock of its angles. The soap someone left, and things close to the skin. You elude what you are thinking of isn't what I think of you. The bird's single note elides abrasion. The spastic wears white as if daring the cup to spill. Vacuum. The green and pink edging the blinds, and not like towels or the lint of time and space. All's come undone, winds slamming the Venetians for vision, and the slick chroming on cars. The white shirt dries in Clorox and air, limbs gone out and quiet. No one's around in paradise, ever. Thank you.
Lewis MacAdams is the author of numerous books of poetry, his most recent being a collection, The River, Books 1 and 2. He is also the chairman of the board of the Friends of the Los Angeles River, an organization he founded in 1986. His cultural study, Birth of the Cool, was recently published by Simon & Schuster. Tonight, Lewis will read new poems he's been working on since September 11th.
When I first came over here tonight, I thought, well, this is a perfect emblem of the state of poets in America right now, in the dark and out in the cold. But as I sort of studied Mark di Suvero's work, and it made me think of a statement by Leonard Crowdog, who was a Sioux medicine man, who said that the Statue of Liberty ought to be on the west coast facing east. I really wanted to thank the people at LA Louver and Paul that put this event together, because I felt like, it gave some reason for poets to be poets. It's not enough, I think, for poets to just be writing. I mean, I think that great poetry demands great audiences, and the fact that you're sitting here is an indication of that. I've been writing works since, I've been writing works since I was 12 years old, but since September 11th, and as I thought that they would evolve in a certain way, and what it seems to be is that it moves further from the starkness of that day, the work tends to be getting more rhetorical, which to me means that I'm moving further away from the real thing. So I just have a couple of poems, but I was going to read, instead of reading the first one first, I'm going to read the second one first and sort of read back towards that day. Big ups to the South London soldiers. Shout outs to John and Rita in Venice, to Michael in Munich, to Harry in Amsterdam with Suze on the bars of his bicycle pedaling away. From Louis and Arvin at the truck stops of America, studying the blasted plain, watching the gigantic American flags twisted in the cold November wind. Looks like it's gonna be a hell of a war, a lean citizen opines. Yeah, buddy, we're all in the beast's bloated belly now, as it moves to enforce its hegemony over the entire earth. Security? None of us ever bargained for security, and none of us ever got it either. Responsibility? Now we got to stand up here in the middle of the night with the police looking at us like we were dead men or dupes. Nicaragua, Grenada, Panama, El Salvador, Iraq, Afghanistan, we are a peace-loving people. Is there anybody I've left out? And no, I am not a patriot, though I'm loyal to the Lakers and the LA River. I am a citizen of the earth. And this is a little quieter work, closer to the day. I think that, one of the difficulties of being a poet in this time is the fact that the forces on both of the sides of this particular battle are forces of that hate the simplest and most basic role of poets, which is to sing freely, and to try to stand up as a poet at this point is a tremendous responsibility, and not necessarily a safe one, and not necessarily a one that is gathered in a circle, but it's more feeling surrounded. September 15th, 2001, which of course is relates to W.H. Auden's great poem, September 1, 1939. And there's actually a quote from that poem in this. Death from the sky in fire and blood. Death in the heart for the faithful who do these things. I and the public know what all school children learn. Those to whom evil is done do evil in return. William Burroughs once sounded a word of warning. There's no limit to the amount of damage an idealist can do. Death in our eyes as we contemplate the dead presidents. Death in our nostrils for the holy man. Death in the flood of the dazed survivors wandering uptown covered with ash, still clutching their briefcases and their useless cell phones. In Dante's Inferno, revenge is pictured as a man gnawing on a human skull forever. Death on the lips of the godheads and flag bearers. Death pounding against the walls of the heart, demanding a radical innocence, like you don't want to kill somebody in the raked sky when the buildings fall down, you know. After fielding my son's nervous questions, I meander down to the river, then look up when I hear the rumble of the first airplane in days, louder than the quacking mallard harbingers of the great autumnal pulse for about 3 minutes as it wings its way north. It must have felt like this at the fall of Rome, with the stench of victory still in their ears. You wanted to get as far away from it as you could. The sorrow slipping away, the fury and the hatred gathering in the shadows and sliding across the channel. I study the arundo and the willow, these ancient enemies, invader and invaded, as they battle for the dying light and try to counter the violence with the silence. Thank you.
I'd like to read a poem called Outside Again. What begins with a melody in another language, a quiet bar at the other end of the city. Illusion as the song goes, fades like wind across a wintry sky, scattering names and dates. Is it ease in the speech of everyday tunes, or only an appetite for words and phrases, ordinary as the hopes of getting there, almost on time, just as someone is sitting down or pulling into the station after so many years? Who sings their Who sings their hearts out every day? In the trees, on a phone line, along the garage? Or is it being what there's only so much time to be? The trees look no thicker than the myriad green around the garage, up the hill to the neighbor's house, all the way across the other side of the arroyo, down to the river and the railroad yards. Now is more becoming than eyeing, beginning with light, playing on glass, vague and white as imagining a page. How far west is failure, a way of eyeing a hillside with a broken down stairway up through the yucca and mesquite? West is where you have gone to sleep, never dreaming of the people we've become, of exquisite strangers with pale shoes and manners perfectly suited to the morning paper. Please come in, my dearest. Hush a moment, that oldest of regrets. Sit and let me pour you a glass. This is one of the better ways of lying. That most of us kids are singing for ourselves is a possibility few like to face. To the country I'm going, having misplaced half of what I wanted you to notice. Why have you become imaginary as rain, the night I expected to hear something at least less banal from you? Drop the bus. Jack's not dying again to keep this room even a little fond of starving. Napkins up, napkins down, a small way to indict the goddess. Chateaus look extremely vital to anyone who's in the market. That the seldom known might find a way to infiltrate what is no longer tenderness, but a moon ever full or empty, driving west or east, out past the suburbs and remorse, into the warm, bustling, impoverished, decorous, unintelligible heart of the city. East on Beverly, west on Beverly, south on Glendale, north on Glendale, and there is still health in me. The quivering host of language at the heart of an abstract people. Not unlike the Breyer family on February 4th, 1850, in a meadow under the bright Tehachapis, startling the careless vaqueros in their saddles. A company of sunken-eyed skeletons stumbling out of the Mojave Desert, having, as Juliet Breyer wrote, seen the elephant. It's my pleasure now to conclude the evening with Peter Gould's reading of a poem by Cavafy. And in fact, one of the beginning inspirations for this collaboration between Peter and I and the rest of the people here on the stage and at the Louver Gallery, and of course, you all here. I want to thank you for coming, and again, thank you very much. Peter Goulds.
I was reading this weekend John Richardson's latest book, Sacred Monsters and Sacred Masters, in which he recounts, in the context of an essay on Lucian Freud, the painter, E.M. Foster's description of the Greek poet Gavafe as being a gentleman standing at a slight angle to the universe. It's rather how I feel in this company. So I received a copy of this poem from a friend in Australia shortly after September the 11th, and as Paul said, it served to be a certain kind of catalyst. Ithaca by Cavafe. When you set out for Ithaca, ask that the journey be long, full of pleasures, full of things to learn. The Lystragonians and the Cyclopides, angry Poisdon, do not fear them. Such as these you will never find on your way. If you have elevated thoughts, if choice emotions touch your spirit and your flesh. The Lystragonians and the Cyclops and fierce Poisdon you will not meet unless you carry them in your heart, unless your heart sets them in your path. Pray that your journey be long, that there may be many summer mornings when, with what joy, what delight, you will enter harbours you have not seen before, and will stop at Phoenician trading ports, acquire beautiful merchandise, mother of pearl, and coral, amber, and ebony, and sensuous perfumes of all kinds. As many sensuous perfumes as you can. Visit many Egyptian cities to gather stores of knowledge from the learned. Have Ithaca always in your mind. Your destination is to arrive there. But do not hurry your journey in the least. Better that it may last for many years, that you cast anchor at that island when you are old, rich with all you have gained on the way, not expecting that Ithaca will give you wealth. Ithaca gave you that splendid journey. Without her, you would not have set out. She has nothing more to offer. And if you find her poor, Ithaca has not deceived you. You have acquired such wisdom, so much experience, that you will have already realized what these Ithacas mean. Anyway, the program tonight acknowledges all of the participants, and I can't thank everyone enough for their involvement. But I would like to personally thank all of my colleagues at LA Louver Gallery, and especially the imaginative problem solver Chris Pate, resourceful individual Mpombo Weena, who, by the way, is the person who came up with the title Where Are the Voices and asked the question, the compassionate Nola Eaglin, analytical Elizabeth East, and my co-director for 16 years, Kimberly Davis. Thank you all very much for being here. You're all amazing to go through this.